Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bintou and I'm starting another good old-fashioned reading vlog. So we find ourselves in the month of October, aka Halloween month. I admittedly am not like a huge fall or Halloween person, but I do love good thriller books, and I will read a horror book every now and then. And somehow this year I actually found that I've read a couple of haunted house books. So I decided that I wanted to add just one more horror book to my list this year for October. And my choice is Stephen King's Pet Sematary. Now, I started reading a lot of King's work like about a year ago, and within the past 1 to 2 years, I've read quite a number of his books. And Pet Sematary, I know, is like one of the top, or it's like heralded as one of his top works. So I hear nothing but excellent things about it, and it's been on my list to read. So I figured, why not start now? I don't actually have the physical book. I've got it loaded on my Kindle, and I have on my phone the audiobook from Libby. I am pretty lucky that I was able to get that. I don't know about you guys, but I find that it's easier to get audiobooks much faster on Libby than ebook. The wait times for the ebooks are much longer than the wait time for the audiobooks, and I guess that's because people prefer ebooks to audiobooks. I'm not sure, but at least in my library, that is the case. Anyway, I digress. On to the book. Now, I don't know much about Pet Sematary, but I know that King himself has said that he considers this to be the scariest book that he's ever written. And I've already read like the author's note already, since it comes at the beginning of the audiobook. I listened to it, and I know that it deals with grief a lot. I'm really curious to see how that is explored in this book, because it's a pretty difficult topic, and I believe it involves the loss of a child, his child, I think. Again, I haven't gotten very far into the book. So let's talk about what I have read so far. So the main character and his wife, and he's got 2 young kids, a daughter who's, I think she's like 7 years old, and then a young son. They've just moved to Maine, and he's gonna be a professor at a university there. And they moved into this new house, and there is this road in front of the house where there's a bunch of like trucks that pass by. And the town lore is that pets are very easily run over by these trucks. So there's a pet cemetery on their property, or behind their property, where their neighbor takes them on the path to the pet cemetery and shows them all of these graves from the pets of the children that have lived in the town. And some of those pets have died of natural causes, where some of them they were ran over. And so the young daughter, when they get home, she's frightened. This is kind of, I guess, her first conversation about death, and she's extremely worried that her pet cat will die in their new home. And so kind of one of the first things that crops up is, how do you talk to a young child about death for the first time? And so the husband is arguing, he's a doctor, death is natural, and his wife is like, no, it's not natural, and she doesn't want the conversation happening around her daughter. And that was really interesting to read. As a science person, I was like on the husband's side. It is natural. It's not comfortable to talk about, and I don't know when, I guess, the appropriate time it is to teach children about that. But yeah, it is a very natural thing, and they're beginning to explore that. That's as far as I've gotten so far. I am hooked already. I'm interested, like, I already know that the pet is gonna die. Their cat's gonna die. And so I'm interested to see how the parents and the child react and handle it. So that's where I am with Pet Sematary so far. All right, guys, welcome back. It is Monday, October 12th, and it's about noon. I'm on my lunch break, so I thought I would update my progress so far in Pet Sematary. So currently I am exactly 32% of the way through the book. That's the nice thing about the Kindles, is it tells you the exact percentage. And also, if you use the Libby app on your phone, it'll do that there too. Allow me to present to you today's wonderful work from home outfit. I've got a sweater with an elephant on it. I actually really love elephants for some odd reason. I'm not entirely sure. Got my maroon sweatpants and my fancy fuzzy sock. It's been a day. Today's actually one of my easier days because I have my planning period today. So I'm not teaching like all day long like I would be on my Tuesdays and Thursdays. But a couple of things so far, and I've got some notes here. A couple major events have happened since I last checked in. First of all, this college kid, so the main character, Lewis, he's a doctor at the university, and a college kid shows up. He was hit by a car while he was out for a jog, and basically he's good as dead when he shows up, and it's really gruesome. Like, he goes into detail about how his brains are kind of like hanging out of his skull. The thing is though, before this kid dies, he calls out Lewis's name, but he should have no way of knowing that because they have no connection. And he mentions the pet cemetery, which means later on that night when Lewis is at home, he has a dream that this college kid comes back to life and leads him to the pet cemetery, and he's giving him some sort of ominous warning, like don't break the seal or something like that. So the idea is don't mess around with the pet cemetery. And so this only happens once, but there's like a couple scares along the way where at night he thinks that he hears noises in the house, and he thinks it's that college kid or the ghost of the college kid coming back to haunt him again. And some time passes and suddenly it is Halloween. And during Halloween, he takes his daughter trick-or-treating, and they go to their neighbor's house, and the neighbor's wife has a heart attack. And Lewis is able to save her. And that's when the neighbor Judd goes, oh, I owe you one. And this guy is very suspicious. I know that something's gonna happen with him later on. I don't know exactly what, but like King is dropping hints along. There's some serious foreshadowing going on here where he mentions how lithe and spry he is for his age. So maybe he's discovered something to keep himself younger than he actually is. I don't know, but I hope that gets explained later on. During Thanksgiving, Lewis's family goes to Chicago, his wife to visit their parents, and he stays back in Maine. However, this is where the family cat dies. So Winston Churchill, their cat dies, and so Lewis and the neighbor Judd go and bury him in the pet cemetery. And that is where I have left off. I have since discovered from watching other people's videos that in the pet cemetery, things that are buried come back to life. So I'm assuming that this cat is going to come back to life, and that was the favor that Judd was referring to, owing Lewis and then having paid that favor. So we're gonna see what happens if this cat comes back to life, if there's any more crazy things. Again, I'm only 32% of the way through this book, so I'm assuming there's a lot more coming. And that is my update. I don't know if you guys can see, but this is the autumn harvest soup from Trader Joe's. This stuff is delicious. I tried it. I bought 1 can to try it, and I loved it so much I went back and stocked up on them because I think it's pretty seasonal. However, it is soup, and it looks like it can be stored for quite a long time so long as you don't open it. And this, along with some baked mac and cheese that I made over the weekend, is going to be my lunch. All right, guys, it is the next day, and I've made some more progress on Pet Cemetery. Last night I read a little bit more, and I'm more than halfway through. I'm at 53%, which is the end of part 1. So now I'm getting ready to start part 2. So a couple of things happened. I predicted that they were going to bury the cat, and it came back to life, and that's precisely what happened. Meanwhile, I'm also opening up. I got a package from Amazon. And so basically, when the cat came back to life from the grave, he just wasn't the same. And it was really weird because the way that Judd described it is that it's meant to teach a lesson to his daughter that sometimes dead is better. So basically she would appreciate that maybe it's okay that the cat died instead of being the way that it was. And I thought that was a little bit weird, a very weird way to get a point across to anyone, let alone a child. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it did work. So the child eventually got to the point, the daughter, where she was like, you know what, if Church died, I would be okay with it. Because when he came back, he smelled really bad. And he just wasn't the same cat that he was before he died. Like a part of him had died. It's how they are describing it. And then the other major thing that happens is that we learn that Gabe, the son, the young son, is gonna die. And I for sure thought when I was reading earlier it was gonna be the daughter that dies. I knew the daughter's cat was gonna die, but I thought it would be the daughter that dies, not the son. He hasn't died yet, but it mentioned, you know, he has a couple of months left to live. So they're foreshadowing that this is to come. I already can predict what's gonna happen when he dies. They're going to go through some tremendous grief at the loss of their son, and I think Lewis is gonna go and bury his son in the cemetery so that the son comes back to life. I feel like his marriage is not gonna survive. I know that Judd, the neighbor, warned him not to bury a person there because he had asked which is why like this is definitely where that's going. But he said that he thought Judd was lying, which means that at some point someone probably buried a person there, but they haven't told us how that works. I'm gonna put this knife down, but I actually got this like Apple Watch band from Amazon. I recently got an Apple Watch like in August, and the reason I got it is because I would watch these like teaching vlogs, and all of the teachers had Apple Watches, and even all the teachers at my school, like a lot of them had Apple Watches, and I was wondering, why does everyone have an Apple Watch? And I got one, and it turns out it's pretty great because it allows you to like check your phone without looking like you're checking your phone. So it's like way more professional to get a text and look like you're like checking the time versus like pulling out your phone. So I love the Apple Watch. I wanted to get a nicer band for it, so I got this like dark brown. I think this is like a pleather band. So just looks a little bit fancier than the one that I had on here for more everyday. This one works really well for the gym because it's got the magnetic thing, and I can like adjust the size to exactly how I want and make it super tight or not. And oh, my lights are flickering. We had power outages all day, and actually some of my students were not able to join class today because of power outages. So that is my update, my rambling update. I'm hoping to get through part 2 tonight. It's a little bit shorter, and I should have more time to read. And I assume this is where Gabe dies and we see what happens from there. So far though, I am really enjoying Pet Sematary. I think I knew going into it that I was going to really enjoy this book, and that is precisely what is happening. It's been a good read so far, very classic Stephen King. So that's it, and I will catch you guys in the next update. All right guys, welcome back to what I'm hoping will be my second to last update on Pet Sematary. Working from school today, very long but productive day. I got caught up on all of my grading for the most part, so now I won't have students harassing me about their grades. Also, by the way, and I was editing the part that I filmed yesterday, and I did not realize how ridiculous I looked waving around my huge chef's knife. However, the Apple Watch wristband, this is pretty fancy. I really like it. So that was a win. On to what's been going on. A lot has happened since I last checked in. I am at the 90% mark. So I have like less than an hour left of reading to do to finish. And just as they foreshadowed, Gage passed away. He was hit by one of the Orinco trucks that came up at the very beginning of the book. And just as we expected, in his grief, Lewis sent his family away. So he sent his wife and daughter to visit her parents in Chicago so that his experiment was that he would bury Gage and then wait for him to come back to life and he would make a diagnosis and decide whether or not he could allow Gage to live, or if he needs to be killed if he came back super evil. All of them totally underestimated the power of that cemetery. The Micmac burying ground is what it's called. So his daughter starts having visions that he's gonna die while they were away after he sent them away. So the wife is like racing back to Maine, and they're all trying to stop him. But it's like the burying ground has these powers, and it's basically putting them all to sleep so that none of them can stop Lewis from burying his dead son. Now, probably the craziest part was the detail that he goes into when Lewis is going into his son's grave, basically robbing the grave, stealing the corpse, and dragging it into the cemetery so he can rebury it into the ground. A lot of detail, very somewhat disturbing. So yeah, that's where we are. I've got only a little bit left to go. I think what's gonna happen is that they're probably gonna kill Gage. He is stronger than I think any of them gave him credit for, but I think in the end they're gonna have to find a way to kill him. And I feel like that's a lot. I mean, he died and now they have to kill him. And even though it's not really him, it's like this evil thing that is using his body, I feel like it's still gonna be tough. So I'm curious to see, there's really not that much left. I'm curious to see how this all ends. And I will definitely update you guys on my final thoughts on this book once we get there. All right, guys, we are back and I am all done with Pet Sematary. So those last that last 10% of the book, which was about an hour or so on the audiobook, a lot of things happened. So first of all, Gage did come back to life as expected. He was, I don't know if I mentioned this part, but he was a lot stronger than everyone expected. And this is where the real spoilers for the book come into play. I feel like most of the book up until this point, I expected. It's been out for so long that I've heard things about Pet Sematary up to about this point. What happens in like the last chapter may have been the only new thing for me. And so Gage goes on a rampage. He kills the neighbor. And this is the spoiler, so if you haven't read the book, you might want to tune out. He also murders his mom. And so Lewis basically loses his mind. The book ends with him just completely losing his mind after his wife dies, literally carries her immediately back to the Micmac cemetery and buries her. And then it ends on the biggest cliffhanger yet, where she just shows up, she puts her hand on his shoulder, and that's where it ends. So we don't know if she turns out better because he buried her immediately as opposed to a couple of days later, like what happened with Gage, because that was his reasoning. Of course, this is also the reasoning of a madman, because at this point in the book, he is totally mad. Yeah, just that was a pretty crazy ride. I'm really glad that I read Pet Sematary. I think that if I had to give this a rating, I'm gonna give it 4.5 stars. I really appreciate the book. It's not like my most favorite Stephen King book that I read, but I totally understand why it is so quintessentially Stephen King and why people recommend it so much. It was worth the read. I will say this, a lot of people talk about how Pet Sematary is a book that addresses grief. And in a way, that is what this book is primarily about, is Lewis grieving his young son and the extents that he will go to bring him back if given the chance. I think of it more as not necessarily, I don't think he does a very good job exploring the depths of grief in the sense that you really feel his grief. I didn't get that through the writing. I think it was more of a what if. What if this horrible things happen and you have the ability to do something about it, despite the great consequences that are associated with it? Would you do it? In your grief, would you do it? I feel like it's more like that. And if this existed, there are, like, you know, and he mentioned this in the book, it is human nature. It's only human nature to take advantage of something like this if it really existed. And I think that's what makes this a little bit frightening, is what happens if, you know, someone went through with this if it were in real life. So overall, there goes my spooky read. I have no more spooky books for October. I read Mexican Gothic and Pet Sematary, and I think that is enough to carry me through the rest of this month. Once again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this vlog, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.